Hey everybody, we're live. My name is Sally Hendrick and I've got some special guests with me today. And we're going to talk about the 13th documentary. Today is Juneteenth and I'm really excited. I didn't even realize that when I scheduled this that that's what it was, but Elaine pointed that out to me the other day. This is a group, we're a new group, and we just got together this past week for the first time to discuss the documentary. I had put out, who wants to watch this and have a meaningful discussion, and let's see if we can actually, take this conversation forward. We've got things happening on the streets, but we're a lot more happening online, and then, of course, there's a lot of people who are prepared to actually take these things forward into legislation and politics and all these different things. But we've got an education issue going on, I believe, and I think that this is going to be helpful. So welcome, ladies. Thank you for coming.
My pleasure to be here.
Yay for having us.
Absolutely. So let's not make this too formal or serious. There's no reason. We had a good discussion the other night. We were all kind of laid back, and I think that we can do that here as well. So let's not worry about the fact that people might be commenting below. We're just going to take care of our conversation here, and we can always go back and respond to people later on the posts on YouTube and on Facebook, because we're live on both at this point.
So, Sally, we got people in backstage that want to get in.
Oh, I see one. Thank
Lori
you.
and Elaine, yeah.
No, I've got Elaine already. I don't see anybody else. Okay,
Lori.
cool. Hey, Lori.
Hi, Lori.
Hi.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us. All right, we've got room for one more. We may have one more pop in at this point in a few minutes. So let's go ahead and just get started. We talked about a lot of different themes that came from this documentary, and I wanted to kind of point out each one of those as much as we can. We want to keep this within an hour and then be able to wrap it up. We can always continue the conversation later. So mental health is one of the things, when you think about what's going on with our society today, and we've got PTSD issues when we're dealing with, some people will look at police officers in uniforms and they will immediately clench up and because they're scared of something that may happen or something that they've heard about in the past, and they want to make sure that that nothing happens with them. And then you've got police officers who have the same thing. They also experience the PTSD, and they've got a lot of pressure on them, not knowing what kind of situation they're walking into. So I'd love to hear a little bit more from you guys from, we talked about this the other night. What do you have to say about some of that? Crystal or Lori?
Well, the first thing that came to mind for me regarding mental health and PTSD is that cops are really not trained to be all things for all people. And when you encounter someone who has any kind of mental health issue or is dealing with PTSD, you can't apply the normal methods for de-escalation, even if de-escalation is even a tool in your toolbox. Not all police forces have de-escalation as a tool that they use, but training for police officers, or even if some of the budget that was used for military style weapons were used instead for mental health training, how to deal with someone who has experienced PTSD, that could go so far as in helping to save people's lives, because instead of situations getting ramped up, you now would have someone who's trained to deal with a person who may be experiencing a panic attack or severe trauma.
Right. And I've thought about this a lot myself, and it's do you call in and have a really great triage system, when you call 911, or if it's a mental health thing, maybe you call a different 11, 411 was information and 611 is cell phone call-in service for Verizon. So what's the other number, that you might be able to call into first? Or to have the 911 operator know how to triage that situation from a life or death situation into a mental health de-escalation problem, or somebody fell in their bathtub. I couldn't tell you how many times you have an older person fall. My mom had police officers picking her up out of the bathtub, and it was horrifically, embarrassing for her, as opposed to like a nurse or somebody coming for that type of situation. Now you've worked in mental health, Lori, and you had some things to say the other night. So what have you got?
So, well, first on the falling, right? People should know, like, the police department shouldn't be going. You send the EMTs for that, because then they're trained in a completely different way. So I know, like, for my father-in-law, when he was sick, you call the fire department, not the police department, for those kinds of things, because then you have trained EMTs who have been trained they're a little bit more delicate, if you will. Like, it's not cops dealing with it. It's actually people who are dealing with people who are sick all the time. So they're a kinder, gentler group. Right. So that's the first thing right off the top, is never call the police for a fall. Call your fire department, because then your EMTs come. The police might show up, but they're not going to be the ones that go in and do the heavy lifting. It's going to be the EMTs that do that. And they have the gear. The fire department actually has the gear for that. They can bring in a Hoyer lift if it's needed. There's all sorts of stuff that they have that the police department doesn't. So that, just off the top, and I only know that because I dealt with that with my father-in-law.
Yeah. Yeah. And I have to say that in a small town, sometimes there's only one place to call. So you don't really know what's going to happen there. So it does seem like there needs to be training and situational plans made for wherever you are.
Right. And also you don't necessarily want your police officer doing that. You want someone in the medical field, especially because you don't know if they were injured in the fall.
Right. What were you saying, Elaine?
I was just going to piggyback off of that too, as far as, having the different departments, but also the education to the community. Because sometimes I would imagine that people, they know 911, they don't know. And so there needs to be a spreading out of the information if there's changes too, because, the population that you're serving, sometimes they won't know. But yeah, I think absolutely. Yeah.
Right.
Well,
and
I think they're starting to have these teams of people here anyway. So if somebody has a mental health issue, maybe suicidal, drug overdose, they have these teams, these recovery teams now that are coming into the ER and handling some of that, because invariably people with a substance use disorder are just being released with no medical treatment at all. And they're finding how poor that is, how poor that treatment is. And Lori made such a good point the other day when she said, or maybe it was in the movie, but for some reason I thought it was Lori, because all these, the opioid crisis now is infiltrated into the white community. So now it's getting more attention, whereas it's been in the African American community forever. And nobody ever really paid it as much attention as they are now, which is so sad.
They did pay attention to it, but they paid attention to it in a criminal way, not
a criminal way.
Right.
That's what I was going to come to.
Thank you.
Yeah, they paid attention to it, but they didn't pay attention to it in a good way.
And they
also brought, if you research it enough, they also brought the drugs into the inner city.
Isn't that insane?
That was an American government kind of CIA kind of. I'm not a big conspiracy theorist, but that's sort of been proven that they sort of brought that into which is another thing, right? That sort of they're feeding that pipeline from high school to prison, right? They sort of set that up. Then they they brought in the drugs. They said we'll have a war on drugs, and then they just sort of created the whole line. And then when it affected white America, it was, and I'm quoting when I say that, when it affected white America, it was like, wait a minute, we maybe have to do something different.
Pump the brakes. Yeah.
But it's that kind of thing is still happening, because I see it every day in my group, where people who have a mental health disorder, substance use disorder, maybe it's bipolar or something, it's a dual diagnosis type of thing. And they're locked up forever for a really, really long period of time, when it's not really, they're not criminals per se. They probably, the drugs caused them to steal something or do something that was a felony. But my point is that the mental health is not being addressed.
Yeah. And when you're not addressing that systemically over and over and over again, you're just creating this pile up that just snowballs. And look at how many people we now have in our prison systems. When you go back to the Nixon era and you talk about the fact that Nixon put forth, I don't know what that is. Nixon put forth these laws that were very much taking the drugs situation into criminality. And when it was, the drug abuse was criminalized at that point, that's when you're filling up these prisons, you're arresting a lot more people. Then you've got Reagan and his drug policies to also be harder and tougher. And then you had Clinton to come in and do the 3 strikes you're out and the truth in sentencing and all of that. And that extended it even more. You've got people who are still in prison now who had drug offenses back then. And can you imagine? I mean, that's just
it's so wrong. So wrong. Yeah.
Yeah. And then as far as like the white community and the black community, the story is that you've got a cocaine problem out in the suburbs in the white community, and that's been kind of this recreational situation. But then you've got crack cocaine in the inner city, and that was the drugs that were brought into the inner city. And the sentencing differences between the white drug and the black drug was a vast difference. There was a much larger punishment for the crack cocaine inner city arrests.
Yeah. And I see that even, in my community, if people can afford the treatments, and an attorney, they get like one specific care versus somebody who can't afford it, needs a public defender. I mean, it's a whole different sentence. It just.
Well, and it perpetuates itself, right? Yeah. So they arrest the black dad. He goes to jail. Now there isn't somebody in the family to help the kid. The kid gets in trouble. There isn't somebody. So they end up with a crappy public defender instead of like the mom and dad are together. And this happens in white communities too, but it's planned for the black community that way. We're going to arrest the fathers. We're going to get them out of the picture. And then we're going to blame them for having, single moms raising the kids. And they've literally created a system where they've arrested and incarcerated all the fathers. And then they blame them for raising their kid, blaming the women for raising their kids improperly, and they're in trouble, right? So you can see, like, it becomes this, like, the more you read about it, the more you see, it's like, oh my God, they created the issue. Then they blame, it's like firing someone and then going, why don't you have a job? Like that's what they do. That's what they're doing to the black community. And what happens is what I keep seeing over and over again, and I'm sorry if I'm all over the place, is they keep moving the goalpost. They do it all the time. They do it for jobs no matter what, right? Like, if you just work 40 hours a week, you'll be fine. Now it's like, you can't just have a minimum wage job. You have to have 2 jobs. You have to do more, right? It used to be if you worked 40 hours, that was good. Now it's like, no, you have to have 2 jobs. No, now you have to have 3 jobs. So they do the same exact thing in the black community with everything, right? Like they make the situation impossible, and then they change the goalposts over and over and over and over again. And it's exacerbating, and the more aggravated it gets.
Well, and when you put things on top of it to, the plea deals that come into play, you've got 90% of black males are having to take plea deals, whether they did something or not. They're waiting and waiting and waiting in jail to get their trial.
And then what about when they take a plea deal and they're not fully explained to them what the consequences of that plea deal is?
Right.
And so they're doing it because they're only told half the story.
Right.
And in the end,
and then they can't vote.
Right.
And they get out and they have been damaged psychologically because of
PTSD because of their, and then they,
And this circles right back to the 13th Amendment, and then the whole fact of like how before people of color were considered 3/5 of a human, and so now that you're a felon, you're pretty much not as much of a human. They've made you, they've enslaved you again.
Yeah. Well, and the 13th Amendment was written that way so that you came out of slavery, but then you've got the 13th Amendment that says you're free, but then it says that if you commit whatever crimes, then you're basically, street. You just can't win. Free.
Well, and then what was it in the very beginning of the documentary? Weren't they talking about how they would set up the different laws, since they were like, if you were criminalized, then they had you, just this minuscule things would make you a criminal. So it wasn't even like major offenses. Like I think standing outside, vagrancy. That was one of the
just standing. Enter the wrong place. You're gonna go to jail. We're gonna haul you away. I mean, imagine living like that and having those stories told to you, having your parents see your parents do that, having your brother, your uncle, your friend, your cousin, your, whoever, having that happen over and over and over again, and all the stories. And then of course the horrific stories that we have been all kind of been sharing and talking about, other anecdotal stories that we hear. And so you just don't even have a chance to create a life. And you had, like, think about it, coming out of slavery, when you go through the Jim Crow era, everything that you worked for, everything that you did, you literally handed to someone else, and you never were able to build a foundation underneath you. Whereas all these other people are able to consistently create these layers of protection to stand upon. And you're literally scraping the ground every single time. And that creates a huge, tremendous gap in the wealth. Now that happened also to a lot of white people. We've got the sharecropper piece of that along in the Jim Crow time frame, which was about, and I'm writing a book, so I've been doing lots of research on this. 75% of the people in Tennessee were either they did not own any slaves, but 25% of the people in Tennessee did back in the slave times. And then of the community after that, I think it was 1 in 4 people in the entire state were slaves. So 25% of Tennessee were slaves. So you've got, Crystal and I are from Tennessee, and Elaine, you live here, but I can't remember. Were you from here?
No, originally from Oklahoma, Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Okay.
Fun fact, that's in the news now.
Yeah. So you're in Orlando now, right?
Right.
Yeah. So without taking over, that whole part of the conversation, I wanted to see, Crystal, if you had mentioned something that happened this week at a protest. Could you explain what happened?
So my daughter organized a peaceful protest with social distancing. She really wanted to make a point that you can support a cause in a way that is civil and peaceful. And the one point that she really drove home was that sometimes things are so bad and the rage is so fierce that you just can't even scream anymore. It's just silent. So she had this silent protest put in place.
Tell us how old she is. Because that's really important. Tell us how old she is.
17. Yeah, and she graduated this year, and she's going to go to college in the fall. She's very excited about that, to pursue a college career in international studies and political science. So she's very motivated. everything was going really well. We had over 60 people there to join the event. A couple of strangers joined in with permission. And then one lady, an older lady, came through and stood in the middle of our protest and just started yelling obscenities.
Oh my goodness.
Called us communists, called us all kinds of names. I happened to have on a shirt that had the fist in the air on it, and she berated that. And just every bad thing she could say to us. And when the kids tried, I say kids, but they're teenagers, seniors and juniors, when they tried to engage with her and explain what defund the police means and what Black Lives Matters means, it doesn't mean other lives don't matter, she would have none of it. And when I noticed, the conversation was just not going anywhere, I really wanted to escort her out of the middle of the crowd, so that, because people were getting angry at the things she was saying.
Mm-hmm.
So we walked to the side and just started having a one-on-one conversation. I let her know my husband is a law enforcement officer. Well, then that turned into, well, then you do care about the blue lives, obviously. And I don't want his paycheck to go away. And we were able to talk as just two people, as opposed to me representing something in her mind that she was just really uneducated about. So I invited her to join us tonight to just hear more about the 13th documentary. She asked, where can she go to find truthful information? And it was just really exhilarating to see someone who was berating us go from that to just really, I'm hurting in so many ways. Where can I find the truth about what's going on?
Good for you. Well done. Wow.
It was a really, really good thing.
That's a huge win.
I wasn't so eloquent today, but I have my moments.
What did you do?
Well, this one person that I've seen, very, very one-sided. I've seen a lot of her posts, and I honestly don't even know how we became friends, and I've never even talked with her, so I don't even know. This happens when you have a business online. You have a lot of people that you become friends with, and you don't really realize what's going on. Before you know it, you've got more friends that you don't know than you do know. And she had just still been on my list somehow. And I had posted about the pickaninny alligator bait video that was so awful. I had posted that and said this was a follow-up. It was a discussion about a man talking about somebody had told him about it, and he didn't understand that all these artifacts that he had, he didn't realize that those were depictions of the actual alligator bait story. And so I posted that video because I thought it was so important. I don't think that she watched it or had any heart for any of that. She just said, you need to stop talking about all this stuff, basically, that, nobody needs to bring all this up again. We know slavery happened, that kind of a thing. And it's like, oh my gosh, don't you understand that we've got to get into the hearts of people and have them understand what really happened and how these stories and songs and continuation of all of these things have kept going even into today. And I know this, and I'm like, I'm from the South, and there's a different culture here that's happened, and there's a lot of things that are much, much deeper than what a lot of other people or places have seen. You've got people who've gone to other places, and I understand that. I said, but are you from the South? Because I'm not really talking to you specifically. I'm more talking to my friends and my community, and I'm here on behalf of people that I know are still hurting today. And she just was not having any of that. And I was like, I can't even look at her responses anymore. And somebody else came in and was gave some really good, eloquent answers as well. And I was just like, I'm just done with this conversation. And but it was on my post, so of course I keep getting all the notices. And I walked away, and I actually was driving, so of course I couldn't post. But I kind of, walked away from the situation, and then I was like, I'm just going to unfriend her, because I've already seen her page. I already know her thoughts, and I'm not going to be changing her mind in any way. And she was very combative. So I unfriended her, and I swear within 5 minutes, she followed me. And when you do that, you get a notification that she followed me. So then I was like, I'm just going to block her. So then I blocked her. Well, but in between me unfriending her and the unfollow and the blocking, she managed to get a message into my messenger. And it was in that extra folder that, in the background, because I'd already unfriended her and we had never messaged each other before. And so I was like, you know what? Whenever you look at someone's message, they see that you see it.
Right.
Yeah. You didn't look at it, did you?
I deleted it. I just deleted it.
Wow.
I'm like, if you want to follow me, you can come follow my public page and you can read my book one day. So, I'm not here for
Negative energy you don't need.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Yeah.
You have to protect your peace.
I think you have to make a decision, right? Like I'm reading White Fragility, and it talks about how, you always want to try and have the conversation, but I've had this conversation as well with my racial justice committee, and I'm like, how tolerant is tolerant?
Yeah.
Like, how long do you have to stick around trying to get a point across when somebody's just so nasty and so racist and such a bigot, like along every line? Like, how long? So it's really like, I think, and it's really important, especially on Facebook. Like they might be people, like I've unfriended a ton of people on Facebook, but none of them were actually my friends. They were people, just like you said, Sally, that I didn't know. Right? Like I have a business too, and it's like I have tons of people, and I'm like, I have no idea who you are, but I know that you're not the kind of person I want posting on my Facebook page. Right. I don't want responses on there. I just don't want it, because like I have other friends that are now like irate as they're responding to them because they're getting so worked up. And I'm finally like, you're not my friend. I'm just gonna like, you don't get to be, you want to post that crap on your page, go ahead. And I do my very best not to respond on anybody else's page.
Yeah,
because I don't want them doing that to me. But I don't want to see their posts either. So if they're posting racist stuff now, I'm just like, I'm just going to I'm going to unfriend you because I don't want to witness it. And I don't feel like I can do that without saying something. So, but I think that's, it's a challenge, right? Because if I want to be an anti-racist, I have to like step up and be able to deal with that.
Yeah.
So there's a fine line of like, where do I want to do it and where don't I? And a lot of the times it's like, well, I don't mind doing it with somebody I know. Yeah. I mind doing it with a total stranger who happens to be my friend on Facebook.
So and they may only be doing it just to get a rise out of you.
Right. So I think it's a different, like, I think, you have to figure it out, right? Like if it's someone you actually know, that's a very different relationship than a total stranger who happens to be on your page because it's a public page because you are in business.
Right. So, and I do want to clarify that I don't necessarily think that she's particularly racist. I think she just doesn't understand what is happening right now in people's minds and hearts in her life. Like I think she's just oblivious to some of those things. And her method is just to kind of be like the whitewashing that everybody's done over the last, 100 years or whatever.
So that's racist. So if you read White Fragility, basically most white people, we have it because we carry all these unaware biases, right?
Okay.
So we're racist. One of the big challenges, like and I hope you guys read the book or watch the video that I talked to you about the other day, that White Fragility. It talks about the problem with calling somebody racist is we've made racism bad.
Well,
and if you consider it non-binary, right? Like we see that there's racists out there that like use the N-word and use the Confederate flag and do all that, and like it's really obvious where they stand.
Mhm.
But for the average, I don't want to say average, for the people who I will call us the progressive liberals who say I'm not a racist. The problem is we carry tons of biases, so we carry that racism within us. We don't like to acknowledge it, but we carry it. And so if we do away with shaming someone for racism and say, you know what, almost every white person has it, and sadly, the way that the system has worked, a lot of Black people have racism against their own themselves. So, and that's the problem with systemic racism. But to say that we're not a racist it's not true. And that's like the hardest thing in the world as a white person I think I'm not a racist. But I swear to God, I judge a person by who they are. I don't like, you'll hear me, and now after reading the book and doing some of the work, and I still have so much more work to do, and I don't want to pretend I don't, being able to say like, yeah, you know what, on my best days, I'll do my best, but on my worst days, I'm a racist.
Well, and I just think I lived in a bubble. For me, looking before I watched this movie, I was in a bubble. So since I've watched that movie, I can't tell you how many people, they'll be complaining about what's going on in the world. And I said, you need to watch that movie and then maybe you'll understand. Yeah. And so it's from that, we have that white mentality from our perspective. Well, I never even look at the color of the skin. What are they all upset about? No, it's so much more than that.
It is.
Or not looking means you're ignoring their entire culture.
Yeah.
So everyone who goes, oh, I'm colorblind. It's like, well, no, that's not effective. That's like, oh, so you don't
want to claim that. That's not good.
Yeah.
Right.
I wanted to bring that up, the colorblind situation, because I see a lot of people I know posting this colorblind, description. And I'm like, you know what? That's the whitewashing that's being done is the colorblind comment, because you're not acknowledging the difference in the culture, the difference in the everyday in the shoes of the person. You don't really understand it. And there's a whole different thing.
No, diversity is beautiful. The diversity, not just the crappy shit that people have gone through, but just that's what's been woven into the fabric of who makes that person who they are, and embracing all of it. How can you really say that you love someone if you don't know them? And how are you you can't know them if you haven't learned them, and you can't learn them if you haven't listened to them. Right. Whoever the them is.
Right. Well, and I think a big thing too is like that whole term of colorblind is such a white privilege thing. Like, what? We're not a color.
Right. What are we, translucent?
Right. We are white, and we and owning that, right? Like, because I just did a facilitated group on this, and it was like, when did what the question I asked and everybody was white was, when did you realize you were white? Yeah. And and it's like, well, wait a minute, because I'm not a race, they're a race, right? They're the race. I'm not a race.
No, Lori, because my youngest 14, she's 14, and when she was turning 3, we have a blended family. We're an interracial family, and so she's white. And it was the end of summer, turning fall, and she was losing her tan. Her dad had lost his tan, and he was giving her a bath. And she goes, well, when's Mommy Crystal going to lose her tan? So it's not necessarily not recognizing that she's white. It was, I don't recognize that she's something other than me. So when is her tan going to go away? Yeah. I think it's taught later on to make those distinctions of, well, she's different or he's different. I serve at church in the toddler room, and I've had more than one white 2-year-old lick my skin to see if I taste like chocolate.
Oh my.
Because I'm chocolate colored. So now with a 2-year-old, well, yeah, let's see if she, maybe she does taste like chocolate.
That'd be kind of cool.
It's one of the reasons I love the littles, because they just don't care. They
Right.
No, they don't.
Right.
I feel the same way. And then they were like, Mommy, why do people say black? I mean, she's kind of caramel. You know, she's kind of like brown, light brown, or she's medium brown. I don't understand the black. You know, like, okay, whatever, good. I'm glad you don't understand it yet. So now, thinking of that, if you don't mind, Crystal, you had posted something on my page where you commented after I had mentioned, I guess it was about the country club parties in Humboldt.
Yeah.
And I know that was a particularly painful thing because it was happening to teenagers in their hometown. So do you mind mentioning what that was like for you?
Yeah, it was very, very heartbreaking because a lot of my friends were white, and we were in the same classes. I was the only Black cheerleader. So it's wintertime and everybody's going shopping for winter formal dresses, and I'm like, oh, okay, maybe I should be looking, go shopping too. And so I asked my friends, I'm like, how do you get to go to this? Because I haven't heard any of the information. And I was told, well, you have to be a member or invited. Well, there are no, or at the time, Black people were not allowed to become members of the country club. And you were not allowed to golf. And I'm talking about, this is 1990, 1991.
What?
1992. This was not back in the day.
Yeah. My hometown.
Yeah.
It was very much like that. Now, I don't know what their official rules on the books were, but you had to be approved to be a member.
Yeah.
And I know that the rules were definitely that you could not be Black at some point when in the 80s, when I was in middle school, when these things started, these parties started.
Yeah, the rules changed, I want to say, in the last decade, maybe a little bit longer ago than that, as far as Black people being able to play. I don't know the membership rules, to be quite honest. I feel like they have changed as well, that they do allow Black members. But for the first time in my life, I was back home a couple weeks ago to help take care of my mom, and I had my two nieces in the car with me, and we were taking the scenic route to just take some time. And so I drove on the street beside the country club. I'd never been back there in my life because I didn't really have a reason to. But if you knew the size of our town, to know that I had not been back there would be kind of just a little bit mind-blowing because our town's so small. But driving back there and seeing the beautiful homes on the lake, I'm just like, I should have my husband apply for membership just to see what would happen if I showed up at the pool. Like, that's what was going on.
Oh my gosh. Oh, could you imagine? It'd be like, yes, I'm a member. I'm so-and-so's wife.
Right.
Yeah.
And then Sally posted the post the next day, and I was like, oh my goodness, this was just running through my mind yesterday.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Yeah. And that right there just made me realize immediately that the feelings that I had at the time were valid, that this was unfair and that this was not cool. And now later on, I think in high school, things were a little better for us, at least my class, I don't know. But the winter formal thing at the country club, it was just a different thing. It wasn't a school function. It was literally put on by various, white families that had put it on as a private party. And everybody had to pay something, to put their money in, or at least the hosts had to pay something to put the party on. So that's how we actually got connected, even though we were already friends on Facebook. I can't remember how that happened.
We became Facebook friends. I probably saw something with Shout Your Cause, and it's like, I need to follow her.
I don't even know. But I think you went to school with my brother.
I did, yes.
Yeah. All right, so,
I have a question about the book. I had to look up White Fragility because I haven't purchased it or downloaded it or anything. But one of the things, I grew up in the suburbs of Detroit and went to high school, a private high school, but we had African-American girls in the same school. I never really thought about it. But what I did, all of this makes me want to talk to women of color. Or I don't see, I'm so sensitive now. I don't want to offend anybody, but I want to learn how to act, how to behave, does that book, White Fragility, does it get into that part of it? Because I have a lot of African-American women friends, like I belong in this Moms Called to More membership. It's like this online community. And I just love these women, but I am the only white person in the group. And I didn't even notice that until the first day I had a meeting. I didn't care about it. I just loved their passion and their whole purpose for what they do. But I don't want to offend anybody. So I'm always looking for ways to connect.
I think you should read the book or listen to it.
Okay.
And I think, you know what? Here's the thing. We're going to offend somebody at some point.
I know.
Yeah.
We can claim ignorance, right? And you know the Maya Angelou line, right? When you know better, you do better. Yeah. So when you make a mistake, what you do is you be transparent and say, right, I'm going to do my best not to screw up. But if I do, I would love it if you talk to me about it. And the challenge is not to get defensive, to own something that you said was offensive. And instead of going, but I didn't mean it that way. And go, I'm sorry that I offended you. Can you tell me about it so that I don't do it again? Right. And that way, because this idea that we're going to be perfect, well, we're not. No. Nobody is. But if you are honest when you make a mistake, and you truly want to learn from it, that's all anybody wants. That's not a color thing. That's not a race thing. That is, if I do something, if I'm talking to you right now and I say something that's offensive and you say, that really upset me, and I go, oh, but I didn't mean to, but I never actually find out what it was exactly that I did. Yeah. I haven't learned anything. Yeah. Right. So the goal is always just to be open to, if you make the mistakes, share with the people. Listen, if I screw up and say something that's offensive, racist wise, please point it out to me so that I don't do it again. Because my intention is not to hurt you. Right. But if I do,
I love that.
I apologize and I want to learn from it. Not, my minister did a great service a couple months ago saying, intent doesn't matter. It's the impact that matters. And so even though our intention is not to hurt somebody, if we did, that's what's important. And that's what we have to focus on. Not, well, I didn't mean to.
Right.
It doesn't matter. Our intent is irrelevant.
Impact, not intent. Okay. Yes.
Now, I don't want to miss these last couple of points. So if you don't mind, I've got a couple more things from the documentary I want to make sure we talk about. There was Angela Davis and the situation with her, and then the Alec situation. Alec being the, oh my gosh, what's the word? It's the American legislation something. They're basically this lobbying group that these corporations pay into to influence politicians, to contribute to politicians, and everything that they're about is making money on prison labor, where prisoners are making $1.75 an hour, something like that, and then the government is literally turning around and selling this labor to these corporations, just like getting cheap labor overseas, and that's taking away jobs from American people who need to be in those manufacturing situations, or at least in, some kind of trade here. But it's being taken away. You're shoving people into the jails to take care of this cheap labor situation here on U.S. soil.
Well, let's call it what it is. It's slave labor.
Yeah, it is slave labor. It is.
Not cheap labor, it's slave labor.
Yeah. So who knows, who remembers more about the Angela Davis situation? Because I'll be honest with you, I didn't get my notes on that part of it. Who can talk about that a little bit before we go into the Alec stuff?
One of the things oh, go ahead.
No, she's just such a hero. I was just amazed. That's my takeaway.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that stuck with me from the movie about her was that she was arrested and labeled a terrorist. And they never really expected her to, what I would call come with facts to her trial. And she did. And it was one of the reasons that she was released. But the way that she described her neighborhood growing up as a war zone with the bombing, she lived either across the street or next door with one of the little girls that was where the church was bombed.
Yeah. In Alabama.
Yeah, in Birmingham, Alabama. And I thought, who in America has lived in a war zone before? I mean, really, to be able to describe your upbringing as it was literally a war zone. So that really stood out to me. And it demonstrated how someone just seeing her with the big afro and and the symbols would probably just label her as an angry Black woman. But once you know her story and where she's coming from, where she's been, it's a totally different story. And it just kind of emphasizes how important it is to get to know people in order to empathize with where they've been and where they're going.
And imagine her PTSD, right? And so, a cop coming up to her is in a certain situation, she's going to have a much different reaction from the trauma that she had as a little girl in that situation. You just never know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And I wanted to touch back on that a little bit, the trauma piece, because I know, Crystal, you were very eloquent the other day when you talked about that. And I've been thinking about it a lot. But so what I realized is, we carry the trauma of our ancestors, right? So like I do a lot of energy work. So we carry the trauma of our ancestors. And if you think of both the white and the Black community, you cannot think that the white people who are destroying the Black people's lives, that are killing and maiming and lynching and doing all the things that they've done over the centuries, if you don't think there's just as much trauma on the white side as the Black side, and now you have two races that are completely traumatized and nobody knows how to deal with it. And the white people's trauma is just to keep re-traumatizing Black people. But in essence, and I don't think the white people's trauma trumps the Black people's trauma at all. Okay, I think we have to figure something out. But I think both sides are coming from complete trauma, and that's why it's so hard to heal, because it's pretty easy. Like Black people will tell you that they know their trauma, right? They know what it's from. But white people are like, I'm not traumatized.
No, they did not.
Like, yeah. It's like, we are. We have it. And so it's a powerful, it's just an interesting play. And I think the white America has to figure out how to heal their trauma so that we can help heal we're going to have a tough time healing the Black trauma if we can't handle our own trauma. So
and I also was thinking the other day that
it doesn't really have much to do with the movie, but it just spoke to me when you were talking about it the other day. And I'm not excusing white people for doing any of the evil things, but I'm saying that we carry so much trauma with us and we see it, right? We see the white rage for no freaking reason, right? And I'm like,
it's a DNA that's passed on through the DNA.
Right. It's that whole it's this conscientious, consciousness, we've downloaded it. So we really have to do a lot of work.
Yeah.
There's a lot of work, and a lot of people have different levels of work. And the thing is you can't keep band-aiding all these little sores that are popping up around the place. You really have to dig to the specific deep poison that's underneath, and that has to be pulled out. And once that's pulled out and cleaned out, then you move into, it's like all the other stuff just kind of will dissipate.
Right. When I think of like, hey, I do think like 80% of the issue is acknowledging it.
Yeah.
Right. If we could just get, like when people are just still fighting about taking down Confederate soldier statues, I mean, for the love of God, in no other era, in no other time in our country or any other country do we have the losers statues up anywhere. Like we don't have King George statues floating around in Boston.
We weren't told that we were the losers.
We don't have any of that. You weren't told you were the losers.
Well,
denial.
Well, somebody pointed out something to me the other day, and I don't know who it was, but it was in a post, and they said something like, a lot of these statues are actually over the graves of some of these soldiers and what have you. And I'm like, that's fair. That's a fair point. Because you've got certain places where maybe that's the case. But that has nothing to do with the bust, the bronze bust that's sitting in the Capitol of the state of Tennessee, right, that doesn't have any acknowledgement of what that person means. Yeah. It would be much better to move. I don't know if anybody's ever been, but in Hungary, they have Revolutionary Park. It's also called Memento Park, where they took all of the, communist statues from around the country and put them all into this park in Budapest. And when you walk around, it's like there's the happy worker, and there's like a huge head of Stalin, and you've got Lenin and all this stuff. And it's kind of neat to see all of that because it's all there in one place, and you can read all about the history and all of that. But to imagine that over the city of Prague in Czechoslovakia, or Czech Republic now, there used to be this massive head that looked over the whole city. And could you imagine that still being there?
No, because they made it a museum is what they did.
Yeah.
They didn't say, let's just keep all these people that harmed everybody out. Like there's only one reason that those statues are there. We all know what that reason is, right? There's only one reason. And they can come up with a billion excuses of why, but we know why. It's a complete intimidation factor. It's to remind people of color that we're going to keep our knees on your neck. We're going to hold you back, and that's not okay. And I'm done being like, oh well, they don't know better. No, they know exactly what they're doing. And if they don't know it, then that's not my problem anymore. So,
no,
sorry,
no.
I get mad.
All right, so we talked a little bit about Angela. Was there something to do with her with solitary confinement, though, or was that just us talking about the Khalif Browder story, which is another topic we could talk about another day?
Well, somebody, who was it that was in there for 3 years in solitary confinement and then he got out?
No, that was Khalif Browder.
Oh, okay.
Well, he was in prison for 3 years, but it was about half of that he was in solitary.
Oh, I misunderstood. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
completely innocent. Completely innessent. Yeah.
Well, he was not plea. He couldn't make bail.
No, he couldn't make
trial. He was just in jail because he couldn't make bail.
His trial was postponed 30 times. 30 times. Wow. 9 different judges. Isn't that insane? But anyway, that's another day. That's a completely different story that we definitely should talk about, because that, when you talk about the prison culture and how a lot of people were put in prison, to fund basically this prison labor initiative, if you will, then to look at the conditions that people are in for these crimes compared to like white collar crimes, and how convenient to call it white collar.
Right.
So you've got this Alex situation, which needs to be completely obliterated. That is ridiculous. People are making so much money off of this situation. And there's a list that I've posted online. I posted it in our group as well, which I definitely want to share. I can probably share in the comments here, but somebody else, it's not me, has compiled this list of 90 plus companies, all of the brands involved, all of the resource links are in the file, so anybody can go and look at it and see which companies are involved. And I wanted to bring this up because there's a lot of goodwill type things going on around the country. So you've got Target, who said, hey, I'm a billionaire, they can loot my store, it's okay, we'll be fine. And then you've got Target that said, let's put $15 minimum wage on every employee, and everybody's like, yay, woohoo, that's awesome. And then you turn around and they're on that list. And it's like, okay, so if you're on this list over here, does that mean you're also going to pay them $15 an hour? Because they're getting $1.75 an hour. They don't have legal funds. They can't defend themselves. They don't have a nest egg.
Who decides that? Who decides that? I don't know that Target is saying they wouldn't pay them that. Who is saying that?
Oh, I don't know if they wouldn't say it or not, but the thing is, Target is part of the ALEC list of companies, or at least the lobbying list of companies that is buying prison labor from the government. Our U.S. government is literally selling this labor to these corporations. And that's just screwed up.
See, yeah.
Fundamentally, I don't care about the ins and outs and the details. That is just screwed up.
Well, yeah, because it is slave labor. I mean, we're making money on, and I'm wondering, like, what is the government actually making off this deal?
Right.
Like, what is the government charging? Like, the guys might be making $1.75, but is the government charging?
Well, the government's making money to then shave off some of the prison costs, which of course they are, because the government's paying. But that's our tax money. That's our money going to pay to do this and to keep these people in this constant situation. When I was at Auschwitz 3 years ago in Poland, they literally these women would get off these trains and they would cut all their hair off and they would use it as fiber to make things for the war effort. They were stripping these women of their hair and using it as fiber to make coats. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
So it's a similar thing. You've got people who are being absolutely beaten all the way down and put in a situation where their bodies, their minds are being put forth for the money effort.
Well, they had to figure out another way. Go ahead.
In that situation, what ended the war was other countries coming in and basically defeating the Nazis.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want that in America. So how do we change this systemic cycle of oppression from within? That's what's on my mind right now. What can I do? What steps can I take to change it from within? Because I don't want a war. I
don't either.
So, I don't know if we need a war, but it doesn't hurt to have other countries saying we're not going to support the government if they don't make changes.
That's
so
coming.
Scotland stopped selling tear gas to America.
Mm-hmm.
They saw what was happening and said, that is a violent regime, and we're not going to sell tear gas to that regime
and
anymore.
the shields, the police shields and the tear gas, and the UN.
So we don't necessarily need them to come and start a war, but it's certainly not a bad thing to have them stand up for the people, just like we claim to do when Egypt, what was the spring thing?
Arab Spring.
We were all in for the people to protest and do that, right? And let's send stuff and be a little bit maybe under the radar and keep that protest going and and now it's happening here, and all the other countries are like, yeah, let's keep that going, right? Yeah. So they don't necessarily need to come in and have a war with us, but it's not a bad thing to have them supporting the people here.
Yeah.
So if there's a way that, I don't think they'll come in and have a war here, but I think they will do what you're starting to see. You're starting to see the UN get involved a bit more. You're starting to see other countries say, we're not going to sell you this anymore. You're seeing other countries say, we back the protesters. You're seeing all the Black Lives Matter protests all around the world, right? That's letting their governments know that what's happening with our government isn't okay.
Yeah.
And so they're not going to come in and attack, but they're going to do it through policy. And that's, is anything that hits us in the pocketbook, especially with the moron we have in office right now, anything that hits us in the pocketbook is going to make policies happen, make new policies come into play. And that's really the goal. Policies changing has got to be the first step.
Mm-hmm.
So
I agree.
Are there any big organizations?
Not bad.
Are there any big organization or causes that are opposed to all of this, that are like exposing this on a more simplistic way so that people can see what's happening? I watched this YouTube woman, Catherine, I can't remember her last name, I'm drawing a blank. And she would go into the prisons in California, I think it was California, Nevada, and she would teach entrepreneurial skills and she would talk about how many Blacks were in there that were just in there for the types of reasons that were in this 13th, this movie. Mm-hmm. And she was working on teaching them how to own their own business, entrepreneurial skills. And then she brought corporations in to be a part of this. It was this huge program and I loved it. I wanted to go train out there. Because I thought, well, why aren't we doing all this kind of stuff, right? And then I don't think she's even doing it anymore. So does anybody know, like, is there any one specific cause that is fighting this type of thing right now?
I think you'll find that there's like I belong to the Unitarian Church, and I know that like they have a huge prison reforms group, and they were very involved with getting some of the sentencing laws here in Massachusetts changed, and prison reform here in Mass changed. So if you don't have to be a member, if you go on, they'll show you information like where you can go. Like our church, we have people that do Toastmasters in prisons, and they work with all. It doesn't matter what color, obviously, but they work with you to learn how to speak and really like hone your skills so that when you do get out, you feel a little bit more confident.
Yeah, but that's not really getting to what's happening where the government is selling the.
No, but right. So I'm not sure about that, but I know like sometimes you have to do the grassroots things first, right? You have to get in there. You have to let people know that you actually give a damn about them.
Right. Yeah.
And sometimes that's small steps. You have to get in there and you have to be seen and you have to let them know that you think of them as more than just a prisoner, right? That they're a person that's incarcerated. Yeah. Not right. Where did I see that? Was that's
the writer Righting My Wrongs. That was when Michelle Summers, she was with us Monday night. Michelle talked about that.
I heard it somewhere. Like, where did I hear that?
Yeah, I want to read that book, and I want to watch. She did a podcast with him. He was her guest as well. The links are in the group, and I need to add. I've gotten some more things from people that I want to add to that document. So, and we'll get that going. So we need to really wrap up, but I wanted to, because we are, a group here. Do we want to do white fragility next and actually talk through that as our next thing before we try to jump into the Yale course?
I like that idea.
I do.
Okay.
Now I love the book. I'm in the process of reading it so I can facilitate a group on it.
Yeah.
In the fall. So.
Wow.
Okay.
How long of a book is it? I have not seen it.
Long. It's like 12 or 13 chapters. It's like, I don't know.
Like a couple hundred pages.
Yeah, it's not. I don't even think it's 200 pages. And it's an easy read. It's an easy read, except that you'll read it and go, oh, shit. And you have to put it down, and then you'll go back and you'll reread and go, oh my God, and then you'll put it down, Yeah.
So,
but it's not it's just
little bites at a time.
It's
And it's not like scholarly text, like research verbiage.
No, no.
Okay,
Really,
Good
if you
question.
go on YouTube and look her up, and she's got all sorts of conversations on it. She teaches it. So she works in predominantly white businesses with teaching people about white fragility and watching them deal with the struggles of it, and being I didn't mean it like that, that whole thing, like that intent over impact. And like, I mean, I can only tell you, like, I read it, and sometimes I have to like sit with the chapter for a week and then be like, okay, now I can move on to the next one. And how's that affecting me? And where have I done that? Like, how am I doing that behavior, right? Like,
Yeah.
where's that showing up for me? And realizing how much it does. And that's why, like saying, oh, I'm not racist. Well, of course I am. I use my privilege on a daily basis. And I live in a predominantly white community. I've obviously chosen that. I didn't do it, I might not have done it consciously, but I certainly am in a predominantly white neighborhood. I could just as easily have been in the city, but I moved to the suburbs, right? So all those things, like, you start to be like, oh, but you needed to go to a good school, which really means, oh, you needed to go to a white school. I don't have kids. It didn't matter where I lived. Had no, right? So, but even if you have kids, why do you have to go to a white, so it gives you all the code words that white people use that really put us in a different frame of mind. And when you start to read it all, you just sort of start to go, oh shit.
Here I am. Yeah.
It's powerful.
This is what makes me want to just mention just this little aside thing, with the things that have gone on. My husband, African-American, Black man, we've been together for, 26 years, I think, 26, anyway, long time. And I was realizing with the things that have gone on in the recent months, he's a runner, and he's really concerned about the past couple months. He's been scared. He never really verbalized it much until most recently to run by himself. And he's started to take pepper spray with him. And these were things that I've been with him for all these years and had never seen that. And I recognize when you're talking about things that you recognize that you do and you use your privilege type of thing, we were having just some candid conversation on our walk, because I had been telling him when I walked through the neighborhood, I was like, hey, honey, why don't you walk with me? Why don't you walk with me? And then as we were talking about these things, I said, it was my subconscious way of using my privilege to extend as some sort of a protection.
Right. Wow.
Like, I'll walk with you because I'm white.
Saw him associate with me.
Yeah.
That would diminish.
You'll be safe as long as you're walking with me.
Or even if people see that he's affiliated with me and they see that thing, and because I was telling him, I says, I can't protect you.
Yeah.
I can't. But it's like, at least it was something. And I recognized, I was like, how jacked up is that? But where you try to use your privilege, and it shouldn't be like that. But I've known that that's what it is.
Or what about you, Crystal, with that woman? I'm married to a cop.
Yeah. I use my husband's white privilege.
Right.
And it is starting to weigh on me because I never really thought about it. I beyond, oh yeah, he's got it, I'm going to use it. And I didn't really think about it so much until I'm in another group, and one of the ladies was concerned, just like you, about her husband, who's African American, going for a run, and how every time he leaves the house now, she's like, okay, you can't wear hoodie anymore. Don't wear a hoodie if you're going for a run. Like, just
did you? And not to interrupt, I got him. I spoke, and it was subtle because I hadn't really thought about it. There's these little thin rope lights that you can get now. It's like $30, $40, but they light up in different colors. It's this little rope thing, and I got that some bitch, put that on him. I said, "You're wearing that," and then he wears a little headlamp when it's in the Merlin. I said, no way that they can say that you're doing any. You're lit up like a fucking Christmas tree. So not to interrupt, I'm sorry, but you just said the lights.
Yeah, but you're right.
But that's like, so that's heartbreaking, right?
Yeah.
Like, we want to acknowledge that's heartbreaking. That first, that you live with that fear as his wife, and second, that you, and that you live with that, Crystal, but that he lives that every single day.
Yeah.
Like, you live with it in this other way, right? But that's his
reality.
That's his reality every waking moment.
Yes.
And so when Crystal, when you made the comment about Angela Davis didn't want to be thought of as an angry black woman or as another angry black woman, my thought process is, you shouldn't fucking be angry. And what the hell is the matter with us that we think that that's a problem?
Yeah, right.
Oh my goodness. The first letter that I ever wrote for work, just hired, well, I'd been working for a couple years, but I'm writing an official letter and my boss just tears it up, red lines it to pieces. It's too angry. And I'm like, okay. I'm the only black person, but it's too angry. Okay, cool. Help me know how you want me to tell these people that they can't do this, what they're trying to do, without saying you can't do that.
Right.
Yeah. Well, so women, black. I always think it's awful for black women because I know how frustrating it is as a woman in general that we're supposed to be appropriate as it is, and so then you throw on to that as a black woman you can't even be as angry as a regular white woman because that's not acceptable.
Well, because of the emotion, they don't want to see the emotion and the reasons and the discussion. Right. And the whole, it's just too much.
So it's okay. Like for me, like it's like friggin' be angry. Like of course people are angry. Like how can the black community not be angry?
Yeah.
I mean, how can they not be angry?
There's no shame in that emotion. There shouldn't be. Yeah.
Forget about the murders. This is what I always say. Forget about the murders. Think of the day-to-day paper cuts. Every single day, all the time, the paper cuts. And then, it is literally death by 1,000 paper cuts. Forget about that they finally take the gun and shoot you or put their knee on your neck. They've already wounded you so many times. It sort of reminds me of like a bullfight. Like, you know how they put all the spears in the bull before they ever go out to the battle? That's sort of how I feel about the black community. They've wounded you so many times. And then they go, listen, we don't want you to complain about it. It's really not that bad. You must be imagining it. Because it couldn't possibly be that bad. Like,
paper cuts are horrible.
I read something, I can't remember who said it. It was, people should be glad we only want reparations and not revenge.
Not revenge. That woman who did that speech. Yes.
The one that did the speech. It was oh gosh, I put it in the article that I wrote for the news.
It's amazing.
And I wrote that video in, and I cannot remember her name, but her husband is David Jones, I think, and he has David Jones Media, and he's a film producer type of guy. And they were going around the city wherever they are, and they were getting interviews with people about what was happening throughout that protest that evening. And of course, after hearing all of these people's stories throughout that day, she was just full of emotion, and she goes in to talk about her view on everything and how she had push training, which I don't know if you know push, but I did a push training back in college where it's empathy training. And the empathy training, I did it for a handicapped person. Like I had to be blind and I was in a wheelchair and I had to trust someone else to take me around and do whatever. And so it was just kind of an exercise, but that particular organization would also do this training for explaining with the Monopoly game analogy about 400 rounds of Monopoly and 50 rounds of Monopoly. And at the very end, she was like, you just better be glad that black people don't.
They want equality, not revenge.
Equality, not revenge. Yeah. It was pretty amazing.
Wow.
Passion. Well, thanks, ladies.
Thank you.
Can't wait to do this again with you. So let's read White Fragility And maybe we'll have some more people come join us for the discussion and all of that. And I don't think we necessarily have to do, I mean, we'll just have to decide if we do a separate discussion or if we just come online. But I do want to be able to share what we're saying with people out there in the world so that they will get the benefit of what we're talking about. We're not perfect. We're just doing it.
Yep.
Thank you. Right. Thanks, Sally.
Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night.